All right, I call the September 21st, 2021 meeting of the Village Planning Board to order. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing for Hal Book and Lisa Bear, 178 East Market Street. Are they here? I don't think they're here. You're here.
I'm here.
I just called you. Come on in. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, why don't we show what the project is, and then we can see if there's someone here. Is there someone here for this public hearing that wants to make a comment? Okay, let us make the little presentation, then you can come up and speak. So, the proposal is to remove the old garage and rebuild it as a three-car garage with a pool house and a family recreation area in the back of the building. And we made a site visit there. You point that towards you, or we can't hear you, it's a unidirectional mic. And we did a site inspection of the barn, and I think we generally agreed that the building was falling down. And so the issue for us is that the demolition of a historic building, or part of a historic building, like an accessory building, sometimes requires a demolition permit if we deem it to be historically significant. And we didn't feel that it is historically significant. We felt that we should have a public hearing anyway to get some input from the public about the demolition of the structure, should anyone care to make some comments. So we don't have a microphone for that gentleman.
They'll have to come up and use the,
Right,
anyone that wishes to make a public comment.
right. The chair, oh, it's over there. Would you like to make a comment? No, no, okay. You can come in and speak to that microphone, so you'll be heard. But say your name and where you live.
My name is Ralph Rowe.
You have to speak into the microphone, turn it towards you. All right.
My name is Ralph Rowe. I live right next to Lisa at 182 East Market Street, Jason's property. As owner of the property immediately east of 178 East Market Street, I do have some concerns and comments regarding the scope.
Can you speak a little louder?
Is that mic on?
It is.
About the scope of the project, rather than renovating the current barn structure, the plan seems to be to demolish said structure and build a new and expanded one with additional square footage, including a third garage, a usable second floor, an office, 2 bathrooms, a gym, a living area with kitchen, and an area for 3D golf. This is a huge building project with noise, disruption, and impact right next to our house. Our house is set back just 8 feet from the border of Book Bear property. It appears that the footprint of the proposed new building would be 12 feet closer to the property line and expand 9 feet toward the road, blocking air and light. Could the new building stick to the footprint of the old, or expand toward the west, adding a new garage to that end? With the proposal of the building coming closer, we're also very concerned for the mature 40-foot hemlock trees which now screen the view from the Book Bear extensive parking area and house from our view. We would hope that although the hemlocks are very close to the proposed project, that they could be maintained for privacy and tree preservation. Without them, the whole east side of our house would overlook the project and property with no greenery screen. There is also a large walnut tree on the border. toward the back, which would be lovely to preserve as well. Currently, the structure is an old modest barn with no windows on the side of the shed or the two-story barn which face our property and would be demolished. We hope that this no windows feature could be retained in the new building. The current plan shows many windows, including on the new second floor, which would overlook and shine onto our property from the building, which is moved 12 feet closer to us. Regarding light, it would be within code that all new lighting should be downward facing and shielded, as the current lights on the two-car garage illuminate our living room kitchen at night, even through the hemlocks. FEMA contacted us in 2018 to inform us that we're in a high-risk flood area. Since we're opposite the current barn and elevated by an 18-inch stone wall, like this, the new structure would have to meet FEMA guidelines for bathrooms and kitchen. We're concerned about the new building on the floodplain and the storm runoff, which currently is a problem from the extensive driveways. We know that this is not for the board to control, but we're also concerned that with a new improved larger structure, that sometime in the future, it could very easily be turned into an apartment dwelling or an Airbnb. Hal and Lisa have been excellent neighbors for many years. However, with our house so close to the property line, just 8 feet with overlooking windows and deck, the scope of this project is huge for us. Our concerns about keeping the hemlock trees, windows, downward-facing lighting, meeting FEMA requirements and water runoff management are real issues for us. It seems that a renovation of the current shed and barn changed to demolish the current structure and creating a new building with expanded square footage, third garage, a usable second floor, office, bathrooms, gym, living areas, 3D area for golf. A project of such magnitude would mean great noise disruption and change for us. Understand that from this project we lose light, privacy, peace and quiet of a neighborhood that's been sustained for 40 years. What we stand to gain is a larger, more populated structure and disrupted on a delicate floodplain.
Thank you. Okay, we have a bunch of issues to talk about with this, but could you move the mic so we can hear from the two of you, and you could return to your seat if you have any questions, you can come back up again, but it's kind of tight quarters in here. So,
Can I just make sure that everybody has the correct set of drawings? Because I see that ones John's looking at are not correct.
We haven't been able to hand them out, we're trying to hand them out right now.
Okay.
So the ones from like 2 meetings ago are not the right, okay,
We've made some modifications.
these are a complete set.
oh, okay.
So thank you. There's only one map of the floodplain?
I didn't get one.
No, I didn't get one
Oh,
either.
okay.
No, I mean,
We're gonna share it
the
then.
map of the,
Oh, okay.
that map of the floodplain.
Okay.
So, huh?
Is this the map that's included in the handout?
Yes,
Okay.
I think we're missing one.
Oh, here it is.
I think Justin had it.
Thanks.
So our first question, the map that you sent out's a little confusing, is the 0.2% annual chance of flood hazard is brown, 1%. The whole property seems to be surrounded by brown. What does that mean? And
So I am not a floodplain expert. We reached out to Rod Morrison to see if he could help analyze this for us. It's just not anything
But the blue area is definitely the floodplain without elevation. It was the elevations. Did Ken look at this?
No, Justin looked at it. I'm waiting for a response from Justin.
All right.
And we'll do more work is to determine what we need to do and what issues there may or may not be.
Yeah, I had a blow-up map, more enlarged map that showed the property up close. And it was pretty clear from that that the existing barn is in the 100-year floodplain. And therefore would be subject to the floodplain permit process, which is administered by our CEO, I believe. So before we could do anything in terms of approvals or moving this thing forward, we'd have to have a ruling as to, and you'd have to address the floodplain law to make sure that you're in compliance.
Okay.
I think I said that 2 weeks ago, or whenever it was. So that's something that's gonna have to happen before we can do anything. Because we can't move if it's in the floodplain and it's not consistent with the floodplain law, or we don't even have a determination one way or the other.
I reached out to Rod a couple of times, but I think at this point, I wasn't exactly sure where everything was on this because it's still kind of blurry. And then it does appear that the pool and the barn are in zone 8E.
Yeah.
So we just need to understand what, and I'm sure he knows
Right.
what that means and what we have to do to
Yeah.
mitigate any issues.
You probably didn't experience anything. There were 3 big storms the last month or two, and the mayor went down and opened up the valves on Crystal Lake and drained part of the lake, so the water did not build up like it did during Hurricane Irene when we flooded Route 9 and the whole lake overflowed. And there was a lot of water up at the park, the playground was all flooded as well. So the fact that the mayor opened the valves 3 times, you didn't experience what you might have experienced were those valves not working, which they were not working in 2011. But still, this is the law, and we have to see, we have to get someone to clarify this about building in the floodplain, because you're right on the water. So I guess the other questions, if these are the plans some of the neighbor pointed out, is how far, first of all, are there any windows on that side of the barn?
There are a few windows on that side of the barn. There's 2 in the garage itself. I'm sorry, in the existing barn, there are none. In the proposed barn, we do have 2 windows on the garage, in the garage section, as well as, which would be kind of double hungs, double windows. And then we have 3 transoms that are up way high in the gable end, as you can see here.
It's the east side.
So they would, the sill height on those is going to be roughly 6 feet off the floor. So they're really just a less than.
So it's the east elevation?
Yes.
Yeah.
So those are like transom windows.
And what is inside of that?
That's where the proposed golf simulator would be located.
I think it might be helpful to point out the hemlocks that are there at the moment. First of all, the structure is a 2-story structure where those windows would be. My neighbors, who, of course, we are concerned with any concerns they have, their structure is 1 story. And so here's a picture of the hemlocks at the moment. So the hemlocks would cover all of these windows because they're quite tall. And we would do everything we could to retain the hemlocks. They've been there a long time. We've lived there for almost 17 years. When we moved in, we put in a 6-foot privacy fence between ourselves and the neighbors to help with privacy because it is close. And so, we, of course, we try and maintain the wooded area as much as possible, but I don't think even from those windows, which are really high, you're going to see anything but trees.
It's pretty thick, and I have these photos I can pass out too.
I don't have any overhead shot showing how close his house is, where his house is in comparison to the
So,
garage.
so this, see this layout right?
He's here, but
So he's 8 feet from that line. See the border, you can see the property line. We're
Right.
moving,
right, and where is his house?
right there.
Right there at the barn, right?
Level with the barn.
Level in terms of,
I mean, the same depth from the road, I mean, it's the same,
No.
because the barn is
not the
quite
barn.
deep. Is his house closer to the road, or it's closer, or
it's closer to the road.
Closer to the road.
we have overhead?
Are they hemlocks on your side of the property line,
Yes.
Yes,
behind the fence?
behind the fence.
And are they, how tall are they? It's hard to tell on this photograph. Are they like 20 feet tall?
They're taller than the height of the barn.
Oh, you don't have any
They're at least
internet.
25 feet tall.
We could.
To try to see if we could
And,
just do a Google Earth of this.
Yeah, unfortunately, the survey we have doesn't go over to the neighbor's property,
I know.
so it's not a good.
the new building is gonna be closer to your main house and farther away from the property line, correct?
So, see, do you see the?
I see
red
it, yeah.
line? The red line is the existing structure,
Right.
okay? The new line is the new structure. So there is a pool shed in the back, that little red square that is closer, and we're bringing it back into code.
Right.
So we're gonna be
It's
10
over the
feet from it.
setback.
So it's farther away than the existing building,
That
but
section,
only a few feet.
that section. The front of our garage, you'll see is a red cube. We're making a 3-car garage, which is currently a 2-car.
Right.
And we really can't push the pool we can't push the garage any further west because of the pool. And everything was right there.
There's very established landscaping and trees there. It actually sort of high.
But there's no, from what I'm looking at this floor plan, there's no absolute reason why you need windows on the east side of the building. It lights up a garage, a pool, equipment room, and a stairwell. And that rec room, the windows are up high, but 6 feet is not above height. So you could put them 7 feet or something above.
They could probably go higher.
So they provide light for the room, but not
Right.
visibility down onto the neighbor's property.
And actually, probably the higher up they are, the more east light they might let in if they can get through the trees. And I'm like,
Jeff, you think you could stop this for a second and get to Google Earth so we just see what 178 East Market Street looks like in relation to his house? Thank you.
fortunately, there's a lot of trees.
And can you explain what's been changed since the last time?
So
Generally,
Generally, we've reduced the size of the second floor significantly, as well as the pool room. The second floor now is pretty much just the area above the garage, where we have the golf simulator and the rec room, and a full bath. And then it looks down into the pool room, which is where the kitchenette is and whatnot. Whereas before that was a full 2 stories all the way across. I also took about 4 feet off the back to shrink it
Can't get it?
a bit.
We do a search.
So we
Google Maps.
yeah, we went down
Google Earth- Google
about
Maps?
150 square
Bring up
feet
Google Maps?
from the previous one,
Okay.
but bulk-wise, it's significantly different.
Bring up Google Maps on 178 East Market Street. We can say the one where Google Maps, 178 East Market Street, Rhinebeck, New York. It'll bring-
in terms of the concern for turning into an apartment or an Airbnb in the future, you would have to come to us for approval for
That
that.
street.
And it's not allowed anywhere, right?
It's not allowed in town, is it?
Well, you could have an accessory apartment if you come in and get a special permit for it. Airbnbs,
Layers, yeah.
sometimes we've put as a condition of a building like this that's not intended to be so that it's not illegally used for such, But as a condition of site plan approval, there's no Airbnb allowed, and you have to have a permit for an Airbnb in the village, so there's somewhat oversight over that.
There's the pool, and there's the pool
That's
house.
okay with you, right?
We have no intention.
Yeah.
There's no intent, as I understood it to be not allowed.
All right, well, an accessory apartment is, but, and an Airbnb is both with permits and one with a site plan review.
Plus, there's a limit that the village has of permit.
Yes, I don't know where they are in terms of permits. So it is possible, we'll hear from your neighbor, he's been waving his hand, but it is possible that this building will be farther away than the existing building. It's possible that it could not have windows on that side, that the hemlocks trees will be maintained as a condition of the site plan approval. And it won't be allowed as an Airbnb or an apartment without further action by the board. So I don't know if that addresses all the concerns, but addresses some of them.
One concern that you mentioned is these runoff. So the runoff, we put in that drive probably 10 years ago. The entire drive is pitched towards a
Catch basin.
catch basin that we dug through the backyard that has a pipe that empties into the hill. There's no puddling, and his property there's a foot, at least a foot fence, old stone fence behind my wooden fence. His property sits up higher than ours. So, the drive that's put into.
And the
all feet, the
Roof drains could be directed to that drainage way?
Yeah.
So if the people have other questions, because it's clear that we need to get the floodplain squared away. And if we have any other questions of them, since they'll have to come back,
The neighbor has some additional questions.
okay.
I would like to speak to the hemlocks. The plans that I saw moved the old barn with the shed and a barn attached to it. The plans that I saw moved the barn, the side of the barn, 12 feet closer to my property. When we're talking about just such a low setback, that would kill the hemlock trees. If the barn at the side of the barn was moved 12 feet closer. That does allow a third garage, but I think we have to look at how close to the property line it is. This moves the side of the barn 12 feet closer to my property, which then becomes where the fence is, and would block this hemlocks from getting any light from my house. My house does go back of the, it's opposite. My house is opposite here. Up to here, from here to here. And this wall being moved from here to here 12 feet, the hemlocks are then 3 feet away from it right there.
Is that line the fence line on the drawing?
I don't know.
Yes.
Fence line?
I believe so.
So it's
The fence.
moved closer to the fence, but not disturbing the fence.
Correct.
That's what we're.
But it isn't the fence, the hemlocks hang over fence.
Where are the fence, the roots for the hemlock?
On the back side of the.
On the left side of the fence?
They're right behind the fence.
So it seems to me they still have room to grow.
Yes.
They're huge, they're 40 feet tall. They're like big limbs that hang over.
Well,
If this moves from here, they're alive with this being here. If you move this wall here, building here, the building will kill the hemlocks. And the building will then shade my house. I'll be looking at my house, out the windows of my house at this
But the hemlocks are already shading your house. It's quite evident in the photos that I brought today. You can't even see your house.
I think his concern is that they would die.
They will die. They're right close to that house. If that house goes 12 feet this way, it will die.
This,
I'm not
this is your
arborist.
house here where the arrow's pointing?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. There's certainly methods you can do to
No,
protect
this is my
the
house.
trees during
No,
construction.
that's their house. And that's East Market Street going across the top.
Oh, yeah.
That's your house.
But you see, this current barn goes right into the hemlocks.
That's the branches.
So see where the barn is, you're right, see where the barn is and see where your house is? So we're moving the barn up 8 feet. Your house, it really still is only covering, I don't know, maybe the first 8 feet of your house. Because right now, the barn is lined up behind the back of your house.
No, it's not.
Can you ask someone like, maybe Meg from the tree commission or someone that, show them this and say, is this going to affect? But it would put a condition into this approval that would say the hemlock screening must be maintained, should anything happen to it, it must be replaced, but of course the replacement would take years to grow up. So, it needs some assurance.
I mean, there's probably going to be some branches, lower branches, that will have to be trimmed and pruned in order to put the structure there so that we can get around it with equipment and cut people on ladders and whatnot. But just because you take a few limbs off the lower portion of the tree.
No, we're worried about the roots being damaged by the building on top of them.
Right, right.
They will die. The issue with the runoff involves the hemlocks as well. The water runoff, when it rains, comes from the driveway to the back corner of the barn, and there's it floods back there. Our house is raised up by a stone wall, but the stone wall doesn't go all the way back on the property. The stone wall ends where the barn is,
Well,
halfway, a little part. So.
The gentleman says water comes down, and you say water does not come down. I don't know. We can't go out there during a thunderstorm and see where the water goes.
So we are going to have to repave some of the driveway, is what our thoughts are, is to bring the elevation of the garage up to the same elevation as the pool deck. So that's going to bring it up approximately a foot. So we're going to have to repave some of that driveway, in which case, when we do that, we can make sure it's pitched to the existing catch basin that they have. That works quite well for now.
You may have to have some other footings on that garage if the floodplain requires it,
Right,
to raise it up a bit.
right.
We're gonna have to address this again at another meeting. So the public hearing today was to discuss whether or not we felt the building was historic.
I have
and needed a demolition permit. So we need to take a vote from the board, how they feel about that.
Mr.
Sorry, I
Chair,
didn't hear.
there's one more piece of information that was submitted to the board. Let's take a look. An email from Mr. Rosenblum. I don't know if we've all had a chance to look at this.
Looked at it.
Yeah. But
I think, my opinion about this is Mr. Rosenblum has stated that he's asking for further inspection. In fact, we got a fairly elaborate report from the engineer on the house. 3 of the planning board members did a site visit. I was there. There's a lot of the original frame of the barn that has been compromised, and it's being held from falling over by a thick steel cable. I was a little afraid to be in the building, frankly. So dirt floor, rotted sills, et cetera. So I think there has been sufficient consideration as to the status of the building that we can move forward with a discussion on that.
And so the first thing I'd like to say is, we will continue the public hearing until the next meeting. We don't have to close that tonight. Do we need a resolution on that?
Just-
Okay.
Yeah. Can can I address those comments, the architectural comments? I was not at the site visit, I couldn't make it that day, but I trust your opinion, and I've seen the pictures in the engineering report, and it does look pretty dismal, and ideally, we should try to, as much as possible, save old barn buildings. But this one seems to be held up by a thread, and it's at the very edge of the village, and not very visible from the road. You can see it, but it's not a mainstay of that property, the way a carriage house in the village would be, which would be close enough to really look at. I did raise, and I don't know, the architects never addressed it, I did raise this at a previous meeting, you might remember it or not, that maybe the plan should make it look like a barn shape, similar to what the existing barn or the previous barn was. And obviously, without the garage door, and the novelty siding is probably a replacement siding too. But, this is a distinctively different looking building than a barn. It's more of a high-scale carriage house.
We did use a barn behind one of the churches, and I have pictures of that too, kind of as a prototype of this.
Yeah.
You're probably familiar with it.
Well, I was just suggesting that maybe the shape of the building should emulate the original barn building. So it looks like, since the building presumably cannot be saved or shouldn't be saved because of its condition, that at least the shape of the barn should be remain. So it looks like a barn building, looks like a replacement barn building rather than something borrowed from somewhere else. And the thing that would make that different is that sort of dormer projection on the second floor. I don't know. It just strikes me as maybe the profile view from the village center, not the back, not what's seen by the property owner, but what's seen by the public, should emulate the barn so that it reads as a barn that's attached to this glorious old building that they've maintained terrifically, from everything I can see. I don't know how the rest of the people on the board feel about that, but they can make it,
My barn looks like this.
I know, but
It
it's
looks just like
it's
that.
not the barn that was on this property. That's the suggestion. Maybe it should look more like the barn that's on this property. And it's hard to do with three-car garage doors. But some of the old barns did have garage door type openings. Probably even 3 in some cases. I don't know. It was just a thought that I raised earlier, and I never heard a response from the architect as to whether that's possible or not possible, or worth it or not worth it.
I think the other thing to consider is not in the village center, and it's very, very far from Market Street, and it's, no one's really gonna see this. Nobody walks by. Even if you drive by, you're not gonna see it. You're going by too fast. I don't know. But, so do we want a formal vote that we don't believe we need a demolition permit for this? No. So I think we're all in agreement that we don't think we need a demolition permit because the building is not worth saving. Or
Well, I
how do you
think,
want to say
I
that?
think the question on whether you need a demolition permit is not whether it's worth saving, but whether it's a historically contributing building. And you could argue both ways on that. One, it's probably built a long time ago. We don't know exactly when. I don't think that form that Mr. Rosenblum provided gives us any evidence as to when it was actually built. The house may be from 1840, that may have been from 1912, when the siding was more in style. But I do think of it as a contributing building. And it was shown on the form in at least 86. I don't know about in the 79 or whatever it was form. I don't know if it showed that or talked about this building or not. I can't remember.
No, I don't think it mentioned it.
But I think of it as a contributing building, and so therefore it shouldn't have a building permit. And I thought that's why we were having the public hearing, so that we could determine whether it should be demolished or not, number one.
Right.
And then we we deal with the site plan issues as to what goes in its place.
So I would ask again, does the board feel that we don't have a problem demolishing this building? I mean, I think Jeff does.
I don't have a problem. I understand your point, John. Certainly there are portions of the frame that you would consider to be historic, contribution, if it looked like, if it hadn't been resurfaced, et cetera, and still looked like a barn, which it doesn't really, that would be one thing. But the only historic value I saw in the barn were many of the timbers, not all of the timbers, many of the timbers. Some of them had already been replaced and sistered. Maybe some of the, I think Michael pointed out, maybe some of the windows.
Yeah, there's 4 windows on the side, on the west
Yeah.
side, east side, west side.
And we have talked about reusing those.
Right.
Where we can, as well as there are some other boards that may be able to be reused, either on the inside or the outside. Might be difficult to do it on the outside, just because how do you marry those with new boards? Because dimensionally, they're probably not going to match.
The inside, I would like to reuse any type of beams that we can, so it feels like a barn that's been restored on the inside.
And if you could work those 4 windows in, those are the only sort of architecturally interesting segments of that building that haven't been replaced, as far as I can tell.
There's one that's very rotted, but I think the other two rotted.
So you could use them in the garage or someplace where you don't need thermal
Right, exactly.
protection. On the house side of the garage.
Yes.
So is it, do you want to raise your hand? I mean, we're not going to make a motion here, but I think Jeff doesn't have a problem. Michael?
But it's been cobbed up and repaired and so many things don't do it. It's the same thing as Michael Bird's barn and Buddy Rogers' house. It's been altered so much, it's not worth putting the money into it to try to do it because you can't. It's just, there's just little pieces here and there that, you might be able to find something for, but,
Okay.
so I have no problem tearing it down.
I don't think it looks like a barn to begin with. So, I don't see the point in requiring that they make it architecturally seem like a barn when they redo it. That's my opinion. And I agree with you that it's on the edge of the village and people don't walk by there. So, and it is in such poor condition.
And John?
I consider it a contributing building to the historic district, but I'm willing to vote for a demolition permit on it because of the engineering report and the site visit report by the people who went out and looked at it.
Just so I understand, John, what features or what factors lead you to consider it to be historically contributing? I can imagine 50 years ago, after it had been cobbed up so much, as Michael points out, it probably was recognizable as a barn and would have been easily designated as historically contributing. But now, it doesn't seem like that to me. So I'm curious, what are the factors that would lead you to consider it to be historically contributing?
Well, it's certainly old enough to be historically contributing. It still has certain architectural elements, the windows on the west side
Yeah.
that read barn. The overall shape of it is maintained, and its location is maintained, and it was shown in a picture from the 1980s that it was listed as a contributed building on that historic survey, although that wasn't the official one that got building nominated.
Did it look like it does now in the 1980s picture?
Yeah.
And was considered?
Yeah, it looked pretty much the same, only a little, probably better condition. But it's,
I would think
and
so.
the other barn, the other outbuilding was next to it,
Yeah.
which has already been demolished.
Yeah.
So I think it's a contributing building, but not in considerably good enough shape or contributing in good enough original condition because of the intervening garage doors and the novelty siding and and the condition of it, I'm willing to vote for demolition, but I think at least it needs a demolition permit. Rather than, I don't think it sets a good precedent for us to just decide that it's not good enough shape, so we don't need a demolition permit. And therefore, we wouldn't need a public hearing to discuss it.
Yeah,
Alright, so-
I think that is a good point, actually, the fact that it sets a precedent. What did the rest of you think about that point?
So what would the board like?
We just need clarification on, are you guys voting for a demolition permit under chapter 64, historical protection, building protection, or are you voting simply as a demolition permit under the building code standards?
I vote for the first one.
Well, can you explain the difference, Ryan?
The-
The difference is, option one, we have to do this all over again, because Michael would have to prove to us the sort of financial comparison of, I mean, I don't have chapter 64.
There's a whole list of
There's a whole list
requirements
of
to justify a
criteria
demolition
of what
permit,
the
public
applicant
hearing,
needs to prove.
financial hardship, or all the other
Yeah.
things that justify it. It was
I think,
justified for 37 South Street, why, and when the
Oh,
permit was granted for that building.
okay, yeah, I think I understand that. I would frankly suggest option number 2 then, because I don't see enough features or factors to consider that we should put the applicant through that drastic, an exercise for something that is, doesn't resemble a barn. There's not much left of the original barn. It's probably not, it would be financially significant to try to attempt to reuse the frame. We have spoken about you reusing some of the features like the windows, so, I think it's more like an option 2. That would be my opinion.
I am with Jeff.
And so am I. So with 3-2, we're going to settle
Well,
that.
actually, I'm going to agree with option 2 as well.
Okay. Okay, so the main issue now we need is, one, we need the CEO or someone to clarify the floodplain, what happens with that house if the back of the barn has to have walls to protect it, or, something to raise it up a foot so that the floodplain can't come to it. The second thing is, can you contact someone in a tree commission or an arborist or someone and clarify that what you're doing, show them what you're doing here, and say, what can we do to protect the hemlock so they do not die and the neighbor maintains his privacy?
And can we have where the neighbor's house is in relationship to this?
Yeah, we couldn't see it through the trees.
A
If you-
vicinity map, an aerial.
Well, the aerials didn't work because of all the trees. You'd have to draw it out. Or,
Try to get a vicinity map, also a landscape plan, to try to show as many hemlocks along that property line that exists right now.
I mean, the simple solution is, may I have permission to go on your property to try to stake out the corners of your house so it can relate to our site plan?
You can also, if you go to parcel access as opposed to Google Maps, they always fly before the leaves are up, so you can see houses and buildings better. So go to Dutchess County Parcel Access, you'll be able to see it on there. And so, yeah, if this site plan could include the fence, or label the fence if that is the fence, and where the hemlocks are, and the house,
Well,
just for clarification, and where this roof drain is. There you go. So just put it on the site plan.
okay.
And where the roof drain is and how the drainage off that new building is gonna work to not
make sure the
drain
drainage goes,
easterly.
Yeah.
right. And that an arborist tells you what to do to protect the roots of the hemlock so they do not die and disturb his privacy. And I guess you're gonna think about the windows.
Yeah.
Come over his privacy. So we'll have to
And
come
the,
back.
and the floodplain issue has to be dealt with.
Right, the floodplain.
Sorry to put you through all this. It's just one of those places which has a lot of impacts, and based on the village code.
I think I did bring up last time, we went around the village to try and figure out a structure that historically in our village
Yep,
made sense.
oh yeah.
So we didn't, it's not a,
No, I was just trying to emulate the existing structure rather than emulate something that's on it. Those are all very nice carriage houses. And I'm sure when this one built, it would be nice looking as well.
I mean, I envisioned our original barn with just the dormer. So, and there was enough.
Yeah,
areas.
well, maybe it's, the design should be simplified to look something like that.
We can discuss it.
Ah, that's just my preference. I'm not going to vote no on,
So we're going to postpone it.
whether it has a dormer or not.
You're not gonna rent the apartment.
I'm not going to rent the apartment.
Before you guys leave, because there's a laundry list of things, will you guys be prepared by October 5th? Because if not, then we do need to make a resolution for the next meeting in October.
We need to get hold of, getting hold of the arborist is difficult. Again, I'm just not familiar with the floodplain information regulations at all, so.
Maybe you call, Mako, one of the people on the tree commission. and come
Yeah.
up here. That would be easy to,
Do you have a set here? You can, so I can take this one?
But if we can
Yeah,
get, if we can get
that's
Rob
fine.
Morrison to help us with the floodplain stuff, so we can get right on it, tell us what we need to do.
all right, then we'll leave it for,
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that the board make a resolution to continue this public hearing to October 19th, not the 5th, to allow the applicant and the representatives enough time to gather whatever
and if they're
experts
ready before then,
that they need.
if they're ready for the 5th,
If they're ready for the, it's just all a matter of how it appears on the agenda.
we could postpone it to the 5th, and if they're not ready, we can postpone it to the 19th.
I like that.
Right, so we'll make, you want a resolution?
It's just more work for me, but that's okay. Nah, it'll reflect for October 5th.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Next on the agenda is Michael Casano, the site plan amendment. Okay.
So in response to the last meeting, we basically changed it to be wood.
Is this what you guys are looking at?
Yes.
So no more metal, it'll just be wood as,
The details are shown as 2x4 cedar, 4x4 cedar. This will be painted to match the rest of the trim on the house.
Yeah. Yeah, unpainted lumber is not allowed in the historic district. And, this may be finished better cedar, not, regular wood, but I think it would be better if it was painted the same color as the porch trim, so that it's sort of blended in.
we can't really, our daughter has allergies to arsenic and things in some of the treated wood. So we're just running with the cedar.
Yeah,
That's
I
better.
think they're taking the arsenic out,
Yeah.
fresh treated wood now, but cedar is better, it's better than fresh treated wood, it lasts forever.
Right, and there are materials, I think John and Michael had mentioned last time, that are non-wood but acceptable. They look like wood and they hold paint, but they don't rot and they don't need to be painted as often. And I presume they could be obtained in the same dimensions,
Presumably, I've never tried, but I'm sure they do.
but that would be up to you.
Well, I think we're suggesting that we're going with cedar.
Okay?
Good.
That's a good choice. And paint it, you know, same color as the house, the trim, though, whatever,
The trim.
the trim.
Yes.
Same color as the trim. Okay, do I have a motion to approve the amended site plan for 1315 Livingston Street?
As shown with the
As shown on the
stipulation
plans with
that
the
they'll
cedar
be
and
painted the
painted.
same color as the house trim. I second that motion.
Oh, I asked,
You moved it.
you
I
moved it.
All
I
right.
moved it, I'll
I
second.
qualified it.
We qualify. Do we have a second?
John.
So I second it.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, good luck and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next item on the agenda is 118 Montgomery Street.
And then we
Next
got
item?
Haley.
Halcyon.
Wait, oh, Halcyon. Wait a minute. This thing is Halcyon, sorry. 6384 Mill Street, the former Calico Bakery location, a sign, an existing bracket near the door, near the entrance. It will not be lit. The Village Center Historic District overlay. So,
Two things here. The PowerPoint that you provided has, along with it, a floor plan.
Yes, sir.
Not Are we-
architecturally.
We're only here to discuss the sign application approval, or do we have to review the floor plan and consider parking, et cetera?
well, the parking's been allocated for all of the
Okay.
properties in that building. Calico had some tables in there, I don't remember how many, 4, 5, 6, something like that.
More than this, I still have the original tables in the basement.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any
Okay.
change per se in the number of tables
All right, then we're looking at the sign.
and the sign. Now, did we get a clarification? We never got a clarification from Victoria about the signage for all the buildings. Did she ever get back to you to talk about what Paul had come up with to recalculate everything?
We're working on it.
So is this 20 by 24 in the, is it part of that, of the main building, or is this a separate building? That's, I know, you're not sure.
I don't think that's something for the clerk to answer.
I know.
Mr. Chair.
No,
I can tell you that you cannot get from the Calico building into the old telephone company building. So I think Daniel here has measured the frontage. You guys should have gotten the application that he cleaned up because
Right, the calculations were off.
the calculations were off from the original one. So I think it's up to the board tonight to review, if you guys are looking at sols only, the sidewalk or streetscape that the Calico location or the former Calico is using now. So I think that's what the board is here to review tonight.
Yeah, I think of that as a separate building.
Yeah,
So it would have, based on its frontage rather than the frontage of the telephone building.
It is difficult because everything uses the same address.
yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
But you can't get to one from the other.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, I'm just glad that somebody's working on Paul's calculations to figure it out. You know, back at some point. So, anyone have any other questions?
Did those calculations include these window signs? Lunch well, dinner, nightly?
No, I wasn't aware that the decals counted as signage.
they do,
They do?
yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Are those still applicable, or,
There should be plenty of space for that, if you're counting this as a separate building from the rest of 6384 Mill Street, the other colored brick building. There should be enough space for that.
well, yeah, okay.
Did we have the calculation form? No?
I did not see that. Did that come out?
It did, I circulated it, in the email, it should have went out Monday.
Okay.
Is the location of that bracket and everything, is that there already, the bracket?
That was already there, and the sign is the same size as the sign that the bakery that came in between Calico and My Space. That was
So
there.
presumably if that was approved, then all the rest of the signs should have been, but we'll have to double check.
That's why I made the sign
Yeah.
first, thinking it would be okay.
Normally we ask, and by code, it's supposed to be 7 feet from the sidewalk. Is that 7 feet from the sidewalk, the bottom?
From straight down, no, definitely not 7 feet.
Because of the stairway, it's sort of tucked in a corner, so it's not going to hit anybody in the head.
No, it shouldn't hit anyone, and there's a planter, kind of, you can't see it, but literally right below, there's a planter.
Yeah,
It's probably from the bottom of the sign to the ground is probably about 6 feet, I mean.
If you can't walk under it,
No, you couldn't walk under it comfortably.
You walk into the wine store.
right.
It's right at the alley, as you see here.
So the lunch, well, dinner nightly is not your sign?
Oh, that is the wine
No,
sign.
those are my signs. I wasn't aware that that also counted as signage, but I'm happy to remove that if it becomes a problem.
Well, how do we don't have, do you have the paper, Ryan, with you, or? All right, 1 second. So if we just see how much sign is left over, do you have any idea what those 2 sets of words add up to?
It's barely, they're about 6 inches long. They're actually smaller than I wanted. They're about 6 inches long and about 4 inches tall collectively, if you were to square that out. And there's at least 2.5 square feet remaining on the signage availability if you're counting the white building as a separate building.
Yeah, we just agreed to do that.
So it's pretty close, but
well, what we could do is we could approve this sign, and then you could calculate and fill out the forms for the other sign, and if they're compliant, then they're compliant.
absolutely.
Right.
And if they're not, you have to come back in or make the other sign smaller.
That's quite easy. I think.
The other thing that we always say, and you can take it or leave it, but white signs we found in the past, background, pure white, looks temporary and not finished. And so we always recommend that you do with some sort of off-white rather than white as a background,
Yeah. Okay.
just so it gives it enough of a color that it doesn't look like a piece of paper that's hung up there or a piece of poster board or something.
Absolutely, that's a relatively easy change.
Yeah, so you can take it or leave it, but that's the advice we give.
We have to wait for Ryan to get back.
Yeah, the email I've got here on Halcyon includes the PowerPoint and the signed photo.
But no dimensions. I didn't get it either.
No, I didn't see the
Yeah.
dimensions. Just going to look at- Well, we need to get it back so we can tell them what we decided to do.
I really like the menu.
Thank you.
Looking forward to trying it.
Really excited to get open, hopefully soon.
I did not like the pumpernickel, whatever it was.
Cohen's Bakery?
Yeah,
You
it was
like
kind of
that?
dry. I
like it.
we bought it once, and we didn't like it. Just need to get Ryan back.
I never got the chance to go to Cohen's. I love Calico. But,
Yeah, Calico was nice.
yeah.
Get Ryan back, and we'll make a motion. Let me get Ryan back. So, how much square footage is left? You're a mathematician.
Okay, it says the building frontage is 10 feet, which would allow 5 square feet of signage. The main sign is 3.32,
Just a foot and a
a
half.
foot and a half, so,
That's probably enough. So, Ryan, we're gonna make a resolution to approve the main sign.
Square feet. This
And,
is the sign you're proposing, the hanging sign, which means 1.68. But,
He's gonna do a
John, I
calculation
suppose the
to
1.6
make sure that the existing
wouldn't
words
be enough for those
come in
window
at
signs, would
less
it?
than 1.68.
Maybe not, for the wall signs, you mean?
And if they
Yeah.
don't,
The signs under the
we'll
window.
have to have an amendment.
Yeah, probably not, so he could either take one off or make them both smaller.
Stuff to see this week too.
Right,
I can come in this week, if that's okay with you.
yeah, show it to Ryan. All right, so I'll make the motion to approve the main sign,
Yep. Okay, yep.
and then
That's what's left.
you need to bring in the measurements
Put
of
a
the
rectangle around
words
the letters.
and make sure they add up to less than 1.68. And if they do, it's okay.
It's close,
If
but it's
not,
probably over by a little
if
bit.
not, we might have to drop one letter or something. You know?
You can put it only on one side rather than both sides, or you can make both sides a little smaller or whatever.
That was also relatively inexpensive, so I can put a smaller version if need be.
So you're bringing it to Ryan, at least the calculators are okay, and if not, does he have to come back, or do we want to have him make them a little smaller and get the measurements back to Ryan of the revised signs that are less than 1.68 square feet?
So we're approving the projecting sign, and we're approving the wall signs if they comply with the zoning. If they don't, he has to come back.
Okay, okay. All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Thank you
Good
so
luck.
much.
Get back to
Thank you.
Ryan as soon as you can. So the next one, this runs over, 118 Montgomery Street, the minor subdivision lot line adjustment. Now, this is relatively simple. When this property was subdivided, it was like two sort of pinkish, a pink house and a pink garage. It's been changed now to a blue and white house, and the pink garage is still there. And it was subdivided by drawing a straight line up. It turns out, when they checked, that the water shut-off valve is on the other property. So they're proposing a little zig right there, just to cut it off. Now, unfortunately, we have to have a public hearing on a lot line adjustment. So, I personally don't have a problem with that. I wish they had noticed it the first time, but,
Who knew?
so,
It still meets the frontage requirements for a lot?
Yes, it does. Yes, the two lots are, so we have a minimum lot frontage of 60 feet in that residential area, and we have 64.7 feet for one of the lots and 75 for the other.
Okay. This will be quick, but we have to have a public hearing on the subdivision, unfortunately.
so, we need a motion for the public hearing? Okay. I'll make a motion to have the public hearing on the lot line adjustment for 118 Montgomery Street. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, so he'll post the public hearing
For the next meeting,
for October 5th. I don't, it should be very quick, but unfortunately, we have to do this. Okay?
Home stretch.
Home stretch. All right? So we'll see you in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? That's 2 weeks.
Yes.
Okay, for Halloween. Before Halloween.
You guys decide whether you want to reflect the new lot, whether you want the garage left on there, or because of the tree damage, you want to take it off.
It's almost half down. We just had a disaster, you might have seen or heard.
I did see
My neighbor
that.
next door, 3 huge oaks came down, cut their house in half and demolished the pink garage.
Oh, I haven't been down there to notice it,
You
wow.
should go by and take a look. So my garage actually, I mean, the huge oak is on top of it and half of it is already down, so I'm losing a 2-car garage there anyway. And I already mentioned it to Ryan, I, like ASAP within the next 48 hours, need a demolition permit because it's coming down. And
Well, it's not in the
minute they lift
historic
trees-
district.
No, and the minute they lift the trees, it's falling down anyway. But I need it, they're gonna haul it off. It just happened on Sunday. Nobody was hurt, thank God. That's when all the power went out.
3
You might have
trees?
heard.
I did drive by there and I
One
saw
went through their house.
that. Shocked
They
there.
were sleeping. My house shook like an earthquake.
I drove up there
The other
today
one
and
had a
didn't even
backyard,
notice
And
it.
the third one collapsed my 2-car garage.
Wow.
Yeah, just like 2 days ago.
So Marty, I just take that garage off.
Okay, that sounds, there's nothing.
Yeah, there's no garage. That's fine.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
I will see you in 2 weeks for lot line adjustment.
Okay,
Good luck with
thank
the
you.
tree. Wow, I didn't even notice that.
It's amazing, you should drive by.
I I did.
Nobody was.
Today, this morning, I didn't see it. I went shopping in Kingston.
Because of all the trees.
I guess I'm watching the road. I wasn't looking.
You're watching that radar thing that tells you how fast you're going.
Yeah, you're always staring at the thing to see if I'm under 30. Like a green. My wife yells at me if it's red. So the next item is unlimited tomorrow, Trillions, JPC ARD Ventures LLC, Jonathan Connick Engineering. And it's a site plan for the tack shop.
Free copies.
Three copies,
Yeah.
Only 3 copies we need.
one for you, one for you, and we should.
So he has it here, and we're gonna bring it up on the big screen.
Yeah, I don't think we have it.
So, so you've been there for a while, and we've never formally done anything with this building, but we know for a tack shop. And it's hot, it's doing artificial engineering of body parts and 3D printing and other kinds of stuff.
So my name is Andy Video with the Content Engineering. So yes, as you described, it sounds as though they've had this tenant there for a while. That is, it sounds like there's been past discussions with the town about the fact that it really is mostly an office use, and they've got a couple 3D printers that they print prostheses for, I guess, underprivileged families and recipients. So, as you mentioned, the intent is to kind of just formalize the use and the site plan, so that you have an idea. So I guess it's on the books.
And we had some discussion previously that this would be light manufacturing, and I think that was clarified that this could be called a professional office which fits in the code.
Correct.
Remember that?
I remember it, yes, but I'm okay with the professional office. I think it meets the definition.
It's not retail with, arms and legs in the window, people coming in. I'll take 2 of those and 1 of those. It's really a professional office and not retail space. There are no customers coming in there.
Correct, yeah. Everything's mailed, from what I gather, all around the world.
The thing that surprised me is that the last time, as I remember it, we talked about the parking lot. It's not allowed to have front yard parking in the Gateway District. And this is a pre-existing condition, but you're in for a new site plan with a new owner. And we asked them, could you take away some of that parking? Is all of it necessary? And he seemed to think it was. It wasn't necessary, that they didn't have as many, but every time I go by there, there's a lot of cars in that lot. So either the business is better than it was since we last talked to the owner, or I don't know what. But the point being is it seems to need most of that parking. But it's still in violation of the provisions for the Gateway District. If the owner would, I'm sure, remember that there used to be a parking lot in front of that workspace building. And we made them, when they came into that building, put the parking on the side rather than the parking in the front, because that was consistent with the code. And it seems to me that we should do the same here. If there's an alternative that removes parking from in front of the building, we ought to look at it, because this is the opportunity to clean this site up, just like we cleaned up the site next door. And landscape the front yard, and put in street trees and whatever else. Did the owner talk to you about the parking lot at all, in terms of, is it larger than necessary? Can it be relocated? If so, why not?
We touched on it. Ultimately, I think where they are now and where the tenant is now, and I think you touched on it, is that they do have quite a few cars that are using that lot for the employees that are there. So it seems as though, even like you say, since the last time they were here, that their business is growing. I think even in speaking with ownership, the building ownership, that this tenant may or may not be a long-term tenant because at the rate of their current growth, they may outgrow the space. So what they'd like to do is essentially keep things the way that they are, because inside of a year, potentially, they may be looking at a new commercial tenant, that, in which case, they'd have to come for site plan approval most likely, and then we would have to come in and address those items at that time. So they'd like to handle this with as light a touch as they can, understanding that those requirements and needs may change with a future tenant. So it's not to do a bunch of earthwork now, that again, in a year it may change, so they'd like to hold off on that. I do know they're on a well and the septic system, and I believe, based on the well location, that the septic is on the side of the building. I want to confirm that, but, so like I say, a future development or future tenant of the site would modify the site plan to come into compliance with the new unit. So,
Well-
I'd like to handle it with as light a touch as they can.
I can understand that, and I think it's a great business, and I don't want to chase anybody out of a building. But it still seems like we have to comply with the standards. This is the opportunity to take a site plan. We don't know what's going to happen a year from now. I would suggest, first of all, if you can come up with the reasons why you can't put parking on the side of the building. If there's a septic field there or whatever. Seems to me, based on the location of the well, that would be more likely they'd have the septic behind the building or in the very back of the building.
Possibly,
Because you'd have to have, what is it, 100-foot separation.
yeah, typically, but
This is not on the village system, right? It's on a septic system.
that's my understanding.
Yeah.
I'll confirm,
So at any rate, if we need to keep approximately 24 spaces, I want to see those spaces as well landscaped and as far removed from the road as possible. I did a sketch on my computer this afternoon to show you that, in theory, and I obviously didn't know where the septic system was or what the actual parking requirements were, but I showed a sketch that you can take back to your owner and say, here's how to do 24 spaces with the minimal possible out front and with more landscaping. And to me, it's a gravel lot. It's not a high, you don't have to tear out curbs or concrete. It's not a big deal to move a gravel parking lot on a site that's relatively level. And that gives you the opportunity to put in trees as an entrance rather than a gravel parking lot in the Gateway district. The Gateway is a big deal to the village. We don't want ugly site plans at the gateway of our property, to the village. And this, the property just to the west of you was dramatically improved. And when we had the opportunity to do site plan approval on that, this is our opportunity on this one. So at any rate, you can show this. I'm not telling you have to do this. You could come up with a better solution. I just looked at it and said, if I was starting and saying, how do I put 24 spaces on this lot and comply with the zoning as best as possible, this is what I would do. And I threw in a few trees so that you could say, oh, isn't this a nice tree-lined driveway back to a building rather than looking at a parking lot, a gravel parking lot that is pretty, not very attractive.
Another issue was, we require their garbage to be screened and fenced in, and they just got a big blue Welsh thing sitting right in front of the driveway with no fencing or anything around it, so.
So dumpster, is it a dumpster?
It's a dumpster,
Enclosure.
Dumpster enclosure, okay.
and, not something, cheap stockade fencing, something that's substantial and, attractive as a garbage enclosure
Be
goes.
knocked over by the first pickup.
Is it cans or is it a
Yeah, no,
dumpster?
it's a big blue thing, just sitting right there on the edge of the
Dumpster.
parking lot over there
Dumpster.
where it says available 10 by 20. It just,
Yeah,
Right here.
yeah, that's where I saw it on the aerial.
And if there's something, I don't know what the landscaping is on either side, at least on the either side of the entrance, I'd like to see some landscaping to sort of shield the cars. However, whatever John has on his plans. But,
And you can pass those down.
Sure.
And you can have this for what it's worth. Like I said, I'm not telling you what you have to do, I'm just saying, this is the direction I would like to see.
So John, is the idea to take advantage of this space over here?
Well, that would be ideal. If there's a septic system, obviously you can't
Right.
build over a septic system
Yeah.
without changing the septic system, and we can't require that. But it's 59 feet from the building,
Yes.
maybe 52 feet from that shed. And you only need 42 feet for a parking lot in the back end space. The other thing you should know that in the village is 9 by 18 spaces, not 10 by 20.
Oh, okay.
So you can reduce the size of your spaces just by making them compliant with the zoning rather than oversized.
It's hard to define a space on gravel.
Yes, I mean, you can.
You
They,
can put concrete stops to define space.
yeah, concrete stops, or they have markers that you can put in the gravel that they've done at certain lots. So it just gives you a point so that people park more efficiently and therefore they don't, take up 12 feet per space.
And the recommendation for some more landscaping to shield some of those things. There's just one observation I want to make. In support of what John has said, it is true that this was an existing building and the parking lot was there before. However, in the last 8 years or so, every time I would drive past there on Route 9 when it was the TAC, it never attracted my attention because there was hardly ever any cars in that parking space. Now, when you go by, that parking area is packed. And when you drive down Route 9, it draws your eye to it because it's so busy with cars. So I think the idea of doing something and taking advantage to correct the site plan is a thing we need to do. I agree.
Okay. Yeah, again, I will take this back to the applicant and chat with them about some of your recommendations and see, again, where the septic is, see what the feasibility of doing that is,
It
as you
makes it a little
say.
more attractive.
Yeah, yeah.
And it would be unfair for us not to do it on this site plan when we were so careful with the site plan next door. Although the owner next door probably wouldn't resent the fact that we didn't do it here, but it
It's
just,
the same owner.
yeah, we have to treat each parcel as
Right.
a equivalent level of compliance with the code. And we did the best we could on the next door, and we should do the same on this one as far as I'm concerned. The gas station also, when the village put a lot of effort, that village planning board before any of us was here, to convince them to put the building up front and the parking in the back. So on both sides of you, the planning board has gone out of its way to enforce the gateway provisions. And I can't see us just sliding on this one when, you've had, I don't know how many years this operation has been going, but it's been going for several years. Should have been taken care of then. Now's our chance. I don't see why we should put it off for a year or two or whenever it might happen in the next time.
I also agree with that. I think it's just speculative that the tenant's gonna leave in a year. We don't really know.
Right.
I mean, if you did a site plan like this with most of the parking on the side of the building, that tenant could expand this building forward and stay there. If they needed expansion space, they could expand the building.
Interesting.
You could expand to the rear if the septic's not back there because there's only a 10-foot setback requirement and you have
Almost 40.
40 feet, so you could go 30 feet further back. And so it's not precluded that this tenant's going to leave. It might be easier to just fix the building up, which, is another unattractive piece of our village architecture. It's not certainly up to historic standards.
Right.
All right?
Okay, so it sounds as though we'll take a look and see what we have for septic systems, the feasibility of.
We'll let Ryan know when you're ready to come back. And we'll put you on the agenda for first or second meeting in October if you're ready.
Okay.
Okay?
Great. And then, so at that point, so you want to see these changes before you deem it application complete?
Right.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So the next meeting is here twice a month. Okay.
2 weeks and then 2 weeks after that.
Yeah, good.
So, just so you know, in the Gateway Business District, the parking section says parking shall be located behind the front plane of the principal structure on the lot or behind the building, and it shall be suitably buffered with plantings and/or fencing. So that's what we're trying to comply with.
Yeah.
And it's a pre-existing site. We know in every case we can't make it completely compliant, but we should make it as compliant as it can be.
And just remind me quickly, your submission deadline on resubmissions, is that still
No, we can make an exception.
Yeah.
for 10 days? So just enough time for you to get it and distribute it and all that? Okay, perfect. Thank you all. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is AT&T Mobility. This is the raising of the cell tower at the fairgrounds by 3 feet, 15 feet for a third tower. I think it's T-Mobile and Verizon there, and AT&T wants to put a 15-foot tower on top of that tower.
Correct, yep. How's it going, everybody?
So our main concern is what the neighbors would see. I went out there yesterday at the fairgrounds, and I took a couple pictures and looked at it, and, you know, the tower is 121 feet now, and, yeah, that's, I took that from Google Earth. The tower is pretty much hidden in the back of the fairgrounds, and then, I don't know if Jeff has the second picture. And I took this picture, so this is a high point in the fairgrounds, and those trees are probably 80, 90 feet high, and that we know is 121. So you can't tell what's visible now or visible when the third section is added to the top of that thing. But the main thing would be, you can go back to the previous slide. The main thing is going to be the neighbors on Wine Coop, the neighbors on Crossmore, Seymour, Lorraine, you know, what can they see? It's all like sight views. If their house is right up against some trees, they probably couldn't see across that. This house I know is high on a hill, it's a new house. Can they see it? There's some more houses along here. There's a former board member, Mary Clem, who's there. I don't know if they can see through all these trees. It's impossible. You saw what I took from us, from your repair side, but from the neighbor side, how can we see what this is now, and how could we see what it is 15 feet higher? Would all the people sitting back here, and, you know, at their barbecues and their picnic tables, be able to see this thing that they can't see now? And we'd have to have a public hearing and get input from these neighbors on White Coop and these 4 roads to see if they would have feelings about that. And so I don't know if you can, I mean, you sent down an 80-page plan, which was interesting, with footings and construction documents, but the thing that concerns the planning board most is the privacy of the public. And how can we get a view of that? And that was not in the plans, like any kind of projection, because this is, you know, it's a pretty unattractive structure. And there's a lot of people that might or might not be able to see it, and might or might not object. We'll have to have a public hearing on this. And we should know, before we have the public hearing, how much or many of the public would be impacted by this structure. And right now, it's very impossible to tell, just looking at the map, because when you look at Google Earth, the Earth is flat. And I can't tell how high the trees are. You know, if you have a 25, 30-foot house, and it's got some 60-foot trees behind it, you can't see this thing because the trees are going to shade you. But if you have a big open space like the house on Wine Coop does, they might be able to see the tower, and neighbors are going to come in and have opinions about whether or not they can see it and whether or not it would disturb their peace.
Particularly in the winter months, when visibility through trees is more likely. The only place I can see it from, I've driven around, the only place I can see it this time of year certainly was from Route 9, you can see it north of the fairgrounds or alongside the fairgrounds looking back, and it's pretty far away at that point. And driving down Mulberry Street, you can see it, but it's pretty far away again.
Here's a shot from Mulberry, John.
Yeah,
This is the tower.
right.
I think the people on Mulberry are probably the least affected, the people.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that, like David said, I think it's the people on Wine Coop and perhaps Crossmore
Yeah.
and some of those other side streets that are going to be more concerned, but
When we did the Baraboo Spa, they produced some documents that showed what it would look like when the spa was built. And you could see that, many of the buildings sheltered you from seeing that. We did the same thing with Northern Dutchess Hospital. When they did their expansion, they presented views from Route 9, from Montgomery Street. So you could see what the new building would look like when it was there. And I don't know how that could be done again before we have a public hearing and people come in and start saying, well, it's going to, ruin my whole thing. I'm going to a big thing in my backyard when I have relatives over for dinner. So it's for your benefit to be able to produce some kind of imagery from those streets to be able to show, certainly from Route 9 or, Mulberry Street, nobody lives there, you can't really see it as far off in the distance. I do not know whether these people can or cannot see it. And if we have a public hearing and we have an uproar because people are very concerned, if they don't see what it looks like, then they're operating in a vacuum.
I
That
think
makes
there were
sense.
some visuals done during the original approval of the Verizon tower. So you might want to look at the files. It could be that you could build on those.
So, so this application is what, so I hear what you're saying and I see where you're coming from, so, but, I think it's fair to assume it's at least a negligible change. It's a almost 130-foot tower, so adding 15 feet is not, like mathematically, it's not a large number. But, so, this application is, it's submitted as an eligible facilities request under section 6409 of this law from 2012 that's regulates cell tower expansions or changes, switches, changing equipment, anything like that. So that was included in the application. So because it's a federal law, it follows, there's certain regulations that follow, that have to be followed because of that. So there's only certain things that a local municipality can request or want to see, or that are applicable, or that because of the federal law that allows, there's only certain things that would have to be provided. So, so that's in that letter. I don't know if you guys, I don't know if you've all seen it. It's in that
It's in the
letter.
package. John, I believe our cell tower law specifically was passed long before that 2012 law.
Right. That's
So
what
I don't
was
know if federal law supersedes an already existing
It does.
local law.
Surely.
But
It
in
does.
this case,
This would be a change to an existing tower.
Correct. Yeah.
yes,
Which
but it's,
under our local law requires, why we're here, a special permit with a
Right.
public hearing. And I believe somewhere in that criteria, the planning board can ask for a visual impact study.
You're saying in the code that you guys have?
In the code when this tower was first approved.
Well,
What's
we've just
existing
retained
right
a
now?
planning and zoning attorneys. Do we want to get some clarification?
Well, they paid for escrow for legal, so, yes, this would.
We have two new team of planning and zoning attorneys. I'd like them to get that material and tell us what we can or cannot do under this federal law.
On page 21 in the thing, line of sight visual impact study as follows. Drawings, photographs, or computer-generated graphic representatives of the views from 1,000 feet away from the north, south, east, and west of all natural and man-made features and structures within those views, including the proposed tower and improvements. So that's what's in our regulations.
We need clarification. The gentleman's saying that we may not have, I don't know what we can ask for.
Well,
It's a new federal law.
if it is indeed ruled to be an eligible facilities request. But in this case, you're going up. So you're making it different, not in just kind. My understanding of LVO is when you put a new shroud on, or you put a new antenna on, or something that has negligible. This is actually going up. And have you agreed in principle that you need a zoning variance to do that?
So, the federal law is, it's section 64.9, it's the 2012 federal, 2012 Middle Class Tax Relief Job Creation Act, 2012. And then the FCC added additional clarifications on it a couple of years later, so that really gives more detail on it. So I believe that was in the application. I know the cover page references it, but I guess somewhat to answer your question, extensions of a tower are included, so it can only be extended by a max of 20 feet for one carrier, and or 10%, whichever is greater. So in this case, it would fall into 20 feet. This is an extension of 15, so it's still covered by that federal law. So if we extended it by 25 feet, it doesn't become non-applicable. So it falls under that law. I mean, if you guys have any questions on it, we do this stuff all the time. So
Well, this has to go to the village attorneys. Because technically, you should have to go to the zoning board of appeals for a variance, because it's 15 feet higher. There's a lot of our laws that fall into place, which you say may not be applicable to the federal law would override it.
So you guys can do whatever, I guess you guys can basically do whatever process follow whatever process that you want to go along through it with it, but the law requires that a decision is made by within 60 days of the application being submitted, so that's when the application is received by the town. So from 60 days on, some things can toll that clock, but the application, because it's considered an eligible facilities request, it basically has to be approved because it's qualified for that, unless there's some obvious problem with it structurally, or it can be determined that it doesn't count as an eligible facilities request or something like that.
Is that deadline based on when the application is submitted, or when the application is deemed complete?
Those are two separate things. So
I know, but what's the law say? When
So
does the clock start?
it starts when it's submitted. So like the day that the town received our package.
Even if it's an incomplete application?
Correct. Yes. So
Well, that
if it's
seems fair
incomplete-
enough.
If it's incomplete, then the town can request and to say like that it is.
This is August 27th, so you're saying we're almost a month into this.
Correct.
Well, I
That's
think,
how it
I
works.
think as Chairman Miller says, we need to just rely on the lawyers.
Yes,
the
we need
legal
to refer to the
review. And to
quick.
answer John's question, it would seem ridiculous to me that if the application is incomplete, that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you could,
That tough luck on us. I find that rather hard to believe myself, but the lawyers will say that. The other thing I wanted to ask about is, I have to admit, I didn't read the 81 pages of the first document. Is there something in there about backup power supply generators that will have to be added to this?
Yeah, so AT&T's adding a new, so they're adding their equipment, so they add a backup generator.
Okay.
So there's not
does this-
one there now.
I believe there is. I mean, it's a very normal, I can look at the plans again, but I believe.
probably
each
AT&T
carrier
wants their
also
own
has-
generator, right?
Yes, that's a,
But
they all
these
do
are
that, they all have. their own
Only
generator.
on when the lights go out.
Yeah.
They're not running constantly.
They're on like 10 minutes a week. It's a
Right.
backup generator, so it's run to
They're
make
usually
sure
quite
it
noisy.
works.
And that's all stipulated in the law when they do the tests, and how many decibels of noise can be heard in so many thousands of feet.
The generator isn't, I can tell you more information on it. I don't think there's a stipulation in the law that anywhere about generators, other than the fact that like where it will be positioned.
Okay,
You
I
can't go
think,
outside.
Mr. Chairman, that's probably another thing we need the legal to review. If it's gonna introduce noise pollution, it's not negated by a federal law, is something we should consider. There are houses close to that. If there's a 10-minute test every day or every week, that will make noise heard at a certain decibel level within a
It's
certain
true.
distance. That will
But
affect our residents.
I mean, knowing the generators that we use, it's not like you're gonna be able to hear that
Yeah.
half a
Well,
mile away
we'll
or
let them-
1,000 feet
We'll
away.
let them figure it out.
Yeah. My understanding, and I'm not a lawyer or an expert, eligible facilities requests are usually done administratively, that rather than in front of a planning board, because that's the way they're supposed to work.
Yeah. Essentially.
So that's something we should ask the attorney, is if this is consistent with an eligible facilities request, if that's what she determines, or he, I don't know if it's who the lawyers are. I haven't met 'em.
Husband and wife team.
Okay. Then also ask how this proceeds. Does it have to go through a resolution of the planning board? Does it have to go for a variance? Or is it something that, because it's an eligible facilities request, it's administratively approved because it complies with the federal law standards for that? So those are sort of the questions I think that needs to be asked.
You contact them tomorrow and send this to them?
I'll refer everything, I'll have to find out legal's
Okay.
direct contact information, but I will refer this. We just need to decide by the deadline, if wherever this falls into, do we provide the deadline of October 5th or October 9th?
We need to know before October 5th, because we have the
October
next
19th.
meeting, yeah.
Well,
October
I
19th
would
is
also
almost
ask
60
the
days.
attorney about when does the clock start?
Yes.
Because, you know, there may be more information needed if indeed it's not determined to be an eligible facilities request, if it doesn't meet the standards in the federal law.
All right, so if October 5th is the date, then we need a motion to schedule the public hearing for October 5th.
Well, what public hearing? Because if technically this could require a variance for being 15 feet higher than, is that true, or is that?
They've submitted the paperwork for a variance anyway. This was submitted based on what it states in our code under solo cell towers, that any change to an existing cell tower requires a special permit, and therefore requires a public hearing.
So why don't we set up a public hearing, and if the attorney says that we don't need one or we can't have one,
Okay.
because it's an eligible facilities request and we don't have jurisdiction, then we'll cancel it.
Okay. So I'll make a motion to have a public hearing on the AT&T Mobility addition to the tower. Do we have a second?
Pending legal review.
Pending legal
And
review.
as John points out, that it can be canceled depending on the information we get from our legal.
Right, for October 5th.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll
And at that,
see you, we may not see you.
yeah,
We don't know.
and at that time, we can make a referral for the zoning board on the variance if required.
If you guys have any other questions, you can email, I'm filling in for Mark, Mark Fuentes, otherwise he would have been here.
I do have one question. What level of G is this? Is this 4G, 5G, 3G?
I think it is still 4G.
It's 4G.
It's still 4G.
So this doesn't preclude the idea that AT&T or other operations are going to come in and want antennas in the village itself. Because a lot of times, they're phasing out the big antennas outside of town, the big tall ones, and putting on 50-footers every third block in the village so that they can get 5G, because the 5G has a shorter throw ability.
Right. I mean, that I don't know.
Yeah.
This is it's definitely 4G.
4G tower.
It doesn't have any 5G antennas or anything on it. It could be upgraded in the future. One of the other carriers could do that. And then-
Well, as a 5G, it wouldn't work because it's too far from anything.
From anybody,
Yeah,
you wouldn't get a
right.
single,
Yeah, 'cause it's
it'd be
kinda-
useless.
Not too many, right.
So this may be outdated in 5 years or whatever.
It could be. And then they make new antennas, and they invent new technology and stuff, so.
But in general, it's a good thing to cite to co-locate. I think our code actually encourages that.
Right.
So we have an existing tower that's in a place that hasn't bothered anybody as far as I can tell. We haven't heard complaints or
It's
anything.
definitely better than building a new tower, that's for sure.
Yes, and so putting a 15-foot extension on an existing tower that's far away from almost everybody, not everybody, but far away from almost everybody, is not something that I think is a terrible thing. But it may be outdated in 5, 10 years because everybody seems to be going to these smaller towers that are all over the place rather than one big tower outside of town on a hill.
I would think they would still keep it, but, and then I think they're
Phase
just
it
kind of
out.
building it all out.
I know in Beacon,
I can't say.
in Beacon where I have some work, they're phasing out the one on top of the mountain,
Okay.
getting rid of it altogether and want to put on small towers all over. So they're replacing the big one, which looks down on the city and it looks like it'd be a perfect place to have coverage everywhere they need it.
That's pretty visible, that one in Beacon.
Oh, yeah, I hate it, the way it looks. It's not like this one, which is hidden in the trees. This was
Yeah.
on top of a mountain looking,
Yeah.
you know, and a sacred mountain to boot, you know, one that the town's named after.
Yes.
I would just like to add that I think it's in the public interest to have better cell service in this area. I personally have AT&T, and boy, it is really lousy.
Hopefully better after that.
Yes.
5G is coming, and I read in Business Week yesterday that companies are working on 6G.
Interesting.
I don't know what it is, but they're working on it.
You have to have
4G
everyone.
took forever, so, I mean, who knows when 6G
We're
will
alive
even
when
start,
6G
yeah.
comes. But, all right, so we'll find out. We may or may not see you again.
Let me, if you guys have any questions, you can email it to
Okay.
myself or Mark, and then go from
Thank you.
there. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is 55 South Street, a proposed three-season porch on the rear of the existing home. With a long meeting.
Pass these down. Jeff, I think I have enough. Sure, Robert.
Killing trees. So porch is in the back of the house and can't be seen from the street. We had gone through some stuff with the previous owner, putting in that picture window on the front porch with, you know, not unapproved. And we came to a compromise with the zoning enforcement officer of putting a mullion down the center of it to make it look like two windows to break up the picture window. But I guess we can talk about the porch first. You ever get a chance to look at this?
Yeah, I mean, from the street, you won't be able to see it.
No, you can't see it from the street, it's in the back.
And I wasn't clear, it's just a porch, it's not an extension of the second floor?
No, it's just the porch. I'm showing the dormer that's on the second floor in the back of it,
Yeah,
that it is connected to and related to.
no, it seems, makes
But it's
sense.
not under it. Again,
Excuse me?
the porch is not under the dormer. The dormer is,
Well, the dormer is up on the roof, set back off of the wall line, and the.
So you can see it there.
the porch is out.
The porch is out in front of it.
Right.
The new roof will intersect the wall of the dormer to get some slope and to get some height in the interior. I kept it at a minimum, so that at the low point of the slope is about 7'6" in the interior.
What's the siding on the house?
Right now, the majority of the house is it's an asbestos siding.
Is that, I couldn't tell without going up and knocking on it, whether it was vinyl or asbestos or aluminum.
It just got painted a bluish gray.
Yes.
Oh, it does have some shingles on the upper level, though.
On the upper level, they were added, yes, and the new dormers have, which were put on, I think, or redone, have cedar shingles.
So putting cedar shingles on the rear addition is consistent with the house.
Exactly.
Okay, that was my first question.
Right. I don't think any of us have a problem with the screen. You can't see it from the road. to the back of a historic building, there could be many additions to historic buildings in the back where you can't see it from the road. My question, there was some confusion with the zoning enforcement officer. People have put split systems on their houses in the village. And this one, out of nowhere, 8 split systems were hung on the house, some of them in the front of the house. I don't understand the need for that many units. And,
It's,
you know,
it's the two-family dwelling.
Is it split or is it top and bottom?
It's split, side to side.
But are those not required to have site plan approval in the historic district? That's my question.
I wasn't involved in that.
Yeah.
I know.
The new owner put them in, and she got a building permit, and she ran it by the building inspector, and it was approved.
I know.
So, not my choice.
No, it's not your choice. I mean,
I
you
would
know,
agree, I agree with you.
you could have put
It's
one
kinda
for
ugly.
each unit and run piping to it or something. So the damage is done. And so what we're asking for, as long as we're going to deal with the site plan modification, we would like evergreens, at least planted, you can't buck the driveway, but at least evergreens planted in front of those and evergreens planted on the other side to try to screen those as well. And try to minimize the damage that's been done to this house by these units.
Okay.
And we are going to be, in the future, addressing this with the zoning enforcement officer. That, we have to figure this out with the zoning enforcement officer. What level of change to a building requires planning board approval, or at least contacting me and letting me know what somebody wants to do. They want to do a fence, they want to change the roof, whatever, but if they want to do something like this was, I don't know, it's,
So there's 2 options, either evergreens or screening fence. And I think in this case, the evergreens would make more sense, don't you?
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree.
And they could be low under the windows.
Some kind
Perfect
of
spot for them
landscaping
right
that
there.
is, that will be in bloom all year round.
Right.
right.
And
so-
for those 3 units that are directly visible from the sidewalk.
On the other side of the house.
Yeah.
The ones behind the chimneys are not as,
Behind the chimney's not as visible, and certainly you can't put them on the side, that's the driveway.
Right.
And that would knock it, so
But
at least
this
some
one-
evergreens right there, and some evergreens in front of the other 2. There, and those 2 we can't.
well, maybe they can do something, there's
Well,
that little,
If you extend the foliage or whatever, the screening.
To the edge of the driveway.
To the edge, you won't see at least the end of it.
yes.
So
Right,
it will help you.
Even this bit of greenery here,
Exactly, you know.
if there was something there that would begin to shield these from view. But it's pretty ugly. And it's in the historic district.
I totally agree with you, and I was pretty much in shock when I saw it
I know.
after the fact.
Well, yeah.
Could put one big unit,
Some of the neighbors are in shock too.
each of the apartments, and, you know, run piping around, and of course, the piping goes right up the front of the building as well, it's, you know,
How noisy are these things?
Well,
I
they're
mean,
not any more noisier than
A
a
window
standard, condensing unit of an AC unit.
they could have put 8 AC units in the window.
We made, what's his name over there across from you, move his when he put it in without approval around the corner there. The guy used to own the cleaners. When he
Right.
put his garage up, he put one of those.
Oh, yeah, and we made
We
him
made him
move.
move it.
Yeah, he
And I
put one
can't-
up on the side facing the neighbor, and
The
we,
Catholic Church came with an original proposal to put 2 of them right next to the entrances of the church and run the pipes right up the front between the stained glass windows. And we said, no, put one behind the tower, put the other one in the shrubbery on the left side, and go right in the building. You won't see them from the street or ruin the view of the church. And so we've been active in this. We have a new zoning enforcement officer, and the code is kind of vague on this. And nobody ever came and said, I want 8 units. So I was just shocked when I ran by a couple of weeks ago and said, what is that? The good news is the house is painted. The bad news is, what are those things? So does anyone have a question about the porch, which is why we're here tonight?
well, I think as a condition of the porch, we're going to request those 3, at
Yes.
least 3 evergreens or whatever it takes to screen those units. But I don't have any problem with the porch, I think it's fine. We're getting a lot of this in the village, a lot of people are putting on rear sun decks and screened-in porches. And during the pandemic, people want outdoor space.
Bumping
And
out kitchen.
behind the building, you can't see it. It makes a logical extension of living space without affecting the historic quality of the building. And it looks like he did a nice job. Are those gonna be
Making a
screened or
motion?
windows, or both?
Screen panels,
What?
there's screen panels.
Right, and are they gonna have windows in the fall or just screens?
No, the screens, she was thinking of having like plexiglass panels put in for, so it's a pre-season
Yeah,
use, but I don't think she realizes what a bear it is to take them out and put in something heavy like that.
If you do too much, it's going to count as part of the building, whereas the screen porch would not.
Yeah, I don't
In terms of
think
taxes
she's
and
gonna do
stuff.
anything other than what I have proposed as a screen panel.
all right,
So is that you making a motion to approve the porch?
Yes.
Subject to, the conditions are to put screening in front of the left and the right side of the
I
building.
think we should see the screening, not just kind of say, go do it, and then they put
so we
a twig
should
up
see
and
it
say.
first?
Yeah, I want to see it first.
I agree.
Okay.
I think
So
we're
can you
over.
come back in 2 weeks with the plan, on the site plan to show the screening?
Sure.
Okay,
I think that's probably better.
good compromise.
Can we have a public hearing? Is there a public hearing required for this final approval?
No,
So
it's optional based on whether we think it's controversial or not.
So I'll come back in 2 weeks with a landscape plan, and then we'll have.
Yeah, we can approve it
We
then.
can approve
If
it.
it meets your.
We don't have a problem with it. This is you're before us with this, with the request for a site plan modification, which gives us a chance to say, you know, we're not happy with what happened here, and we'd like at least them shielded from the rest of it.
Okay.
It's right on South Street, okay?
I think that's a fair.
See you in 2 weeks.
Request. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
We have the Lone Ranger back there.
Yeah.
This one, 22 Livingston Street.
Hi.
So, I took a walk over there, wandering around a lot. I remember this house, this was Dennis's house next to Jeanettinson, and normally, when someone wants to build a two-story garage or a two-story extension or something, we say, what about the neighbors, especially on this street, which is house on house? We just asked, invade the privacy, if you were here for the first item, invade the privacy of the neighbors, can they look out over you and see into your house? And strangely enough, I took a walk down there, and the house on the left and the right side of this house don't have any windows facing the house. Maybe people on the block, because it was so tight, never put windows facing other windows, like in a tenement in the city. So on the house on the left side does not seem to have any windows back there, and the house on the right side doesn't seem to have any windows out there either. You know, you're proposing 3 windows on each side, just raising the roof up and putting 3 windows on each side of the building, go straight back.
Yeah, so a gable, so in the back, there's that 1960s era kitchen addition that was put on. And that has some obvious structural deficiencies, has a wood foundation wall. So it's kind of like it solves a few problems. But the fact that we can essentially build out gives us the opportunity to fix the foundation issues in the back and then give them this more, a lot more living space. And essentially, I really didn't want to, and the client didn't want to, of course, produce this big bulky shed roof in the back.
All right, so
So it sits in from the side yard setbacks, just to avoid a, variance and just to make sure it wasn't so bulky, basically.
I think it's a really nice addition. And again, it won't be seen from the street. However, I do think it's our discretion as to whether to have a public hearing or not. And I think it's a major enough addition to a house
I was
that
thinking the same thing.
we would want to in the historic district, that we might want a public hearing for 2 weeks from now, just so if the neighbors do have some complaint that we hadn't thought of, that we would hear it. But I think it looks nice, and it's very respectful of the original property.
And I was concerned about the 6 windows, the 3 on each side, until I saw that they don't have any windows on the adjacent building, so that alleviated my concerns, but I don't live there on that block. And I will be notifying the people within X number of feet from that house that this has been proposed, and we will schedule a public hearing. Do I need a motion for that? I'll make a motion to schedule a public hearing for October 5th, for 22 Livingston Street. Second? All those in favor? Aye. Any more questions, suggestions for the applicant?
The siding is going to exactly match the historic siding up front?
That's the intent.
Because the battens on there chamfered.
They are, I have,
Right.
I have good photographs and measured them. The spacing that you see is, the vertical lines are,
And the windows are going to have exterior muntins?
yeah. The intent is to really obviously match what's there, we really don't want to do anything too dissimilar.
Yeah, so as long as the windows, the exterior muntins show up as real divided lights, they can obviously have thermals, but the exterior, it has to be on the exterior rather than just on the interior.
Okay.
And the siding has to match the original siding
On
up
a tin
front.
roof?
It is.
That's a lot of roof. Have you addressed the drainage?
Yeah, so right now, all the existing leaders, gutters lead to an underground drainage system. The intent was to tap into that with the, everything that's new is going to.
Yeah. In reality, it doesn't put out much extra roof space than the original because you have the shed roof is being replaced by the higher roof.
Correct.
So you have a little extra
Yeah,
on the
it's basically
extension, but very little extra. And that has a really nice drainage copper system on the front of it at least. It's really very attractive.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
My only question, and I like the addition as well, my only question is, we see 2 peaks in the front. We see the peak above the door, which is this. We see this peak coming off the front of the roof, which is not shown on the side elevations.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's something.
So it's a cross
Something makes
gable.
sense,
So, yeah, you're not taking the peak off the front.
No,
It's
no,
just- It's just missing from this point, right?
yeah. Correct, I'm not.
All right.
All right.
So that should probably be
That'll be correct.
corrected on the plans, just so when we approve it, there's no confusion about it.
Absolutely.
Good catch, I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll see you on the 5th,
Okay,
okay?
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wow.
It's a long meeting we got through it.
Just one thought I had, it's unfortunate that all of their conditioning units got put out there, but they got put out there from an specifically approved building permit.
Yep.
Chairman Miller has asked repeatedly for the CEO to attend these meetings.
Or at least attend them once in a while so that we can ask questions or
Yeah,
whatever.
at least in the absence of that, what I would suggest is, until we're sure that everything is synchronized and we're all, singing from the same hymn book, that any permit application for any building in the historic district be reviewed by the planning board before a permit is issued. And I don't even think that would require at a planning board meeting. It just if they called David or John or Suzanne or Michael, just say, take a look at this. Because if any one of us had looked at that, within seconds, we'd have said, no, no way. And would have prevented the building permit from being, so I think we need a little more oversight.
Unless, yeah, unless there's something specific in the code that says it doesn't need a building permit, like
Oh, yes.
interior
I agree.
modifications, that sort of thing.
I agree.
Anything exterior in the historic district.
Yes, exactly, yeah, exactly. You're right, Joe. Anything exterior in the historic district, at least contact the chairman for a
Right.
quick review.
Right.
And not the full planning, but it could be two people assigned, like Michael and I usually
Yeah.
meet the week before to go over, review the agenda, so Ryan has time to ask questions if they're missing something. We
Yeah.
could pick two people who would be contacted and give a quick opinion.
Yeah.
Ah, this is
And
okay.
if they had put those behind the building,
Yes,
I would have said, no problem.
exactly.
But obviously not the way that was done.
8
That-
units in
That's
front of
just,
the
you can't
building,
allow
the
that to
historic
happen
district. I mean, that's like
in the
a-
historic district.
I ran by and said,
That
what
would have
is this?
taken
And I
about 10
stopped and took
seconds
pictures.
for anyone here to say, no, we need to think of this more and come up with a better solution.
Rhinebeck is changing rapidly, a lot of people with a lot of money.
Yeah.
Gary was in the New York Times Sunday. talking-
Saying
so you're
how
thinking of
historic
living
it
in
is,
Rhinebeck.
and we
Yeah,
have
how
a-
historic we are, so we're gonna be under a lot of pressure
Yeah.
to protect the historic district, especially in the village. And we need a little more, I will talk to Ken. And,
Yeah, last time
Say-
we brought this up, Ryan suggested we needed to speak to Lydia and/or.
I spoke to Lydia today about, she called me
All right.
from DC, and we had a long chat about 20 different things. And I mentioned this too, and she saw that, she said she's seen that.
Yeah, this wouldn't be a hardship and it would solve a lot of problems, you know? How many times have we sat here and somebody argued they should be allowed to do something, we had to tell them, no, and they offer examples, and we say, no, that was grandfathered, or no, that's not in the historic district.
And we went
Now,
through
this
3
was a-
months of meetings on the picture window to come agreement on a piece of wood
Yeah,
to make the house look better.
yeah.
And then a new person buys it, paints it, which is nice, but we're gonna figure something out. I'll
Good.
talk to Ken.
Well, 34 Oak Street, which I have been talking about for a year, they ripped off the front siding today. They've put in a new patio, a new front porch, new fencing, I think new heating. They've gutted inside, and they've got, as far as I can see, no permit. And the whole siding, the guys are up there and all the siding came off, so you can see all the studs and there's no insulation in the wall and they're putting new windows in. And it's just like,
Is that-
it's nice work, you
Is
know,
it-
but
It's not in the
Not yet.
not yet.
historic district, so we don't have any jurisdiction, but it should have got a building permit.
Yes.
Can you check with Ken?
I can check with Ken, I mean.
You haven't seen a building
We
permit.
can send a violation letter. I
Yeah,
mean, it just all depends on what can be proven. I know I've mentioned it to the building inspector, he's gone over there, no one has been there. It's a matter of how they respond, how quick they respond, and, you know, obviously, the building inspector can't trespass. He's not a law enforcement official, he's not a sheriff, he can't walk up there, without, you know, just cause. So he's not going to jeopardize.
you can stand in the street.
You guys are making me talk
No
tonight, and I
sign out
really
the
didn't wanna
window.
talk tonight, so you're putting me in one hell of a box tonight, so,
Bring some throat lozenges.
yeah. I've never known a clerk to talk this much
I
on
know,
the
we
planning board.
need, how
So-
many times that we need support? We need,
Well, the only thing that I can, I can say, two cents, our zoning officer in his other municipality, Tuesday nights are court night down there. So, I don't know how much of a discussion you're gonna wanna have where you have a zoning officer whose full-time position in another municipality requires him to be present at court for appearance tickets in that municipality. Somebody can't be in a place, you know,
We've
two
lost a
places
lot.
at once.
Does he have regular office hours here?
Yeah, they're on Mondays
So
for
maybe
2 hours.
David and somebody else can go talk to him. on behalf of the planning board to just talk over these issues, so that if he can't
He's gotta
come
get
here.
everything done in
I
those
mean,
2 hours.
when he has the office hours, guys, I'm not, being as silent as a church mouse. I am passing on what you guys are telling me to him. And where that goes from there,
How many building permits do you issue a week?
Depends on when, it depends on what they are and how they're signed. If I was to take a ballpark guess, I would say between 5 and 10
A week?
a week. I mean, mostly they are fence permits, roof replacement permits. Recently, we've had a lot of people have to change out their furnaces or their boilers. And then the other thing is tank removal, because the insurance, homeowners insurance has changed. A lot of homeowners companies are telling their insurees, if you have an underground tank, we cannot renew your homeowner's insurance. You have to rip it out and either put something above ground or in your basement. So we've had a considerable amount of tank.
So we have to think of the categories that we don't care about fences, roofs, we have to come up with what we would be concerned about. And mostly it would be, I guess, touching the front of historic buildings, viewable from the street. I don't know. I gotta talk to Ken. Let me talk to Ken this week. I'll send an email out to everybody about what we discussed.
Are we ready to close?
I think we're ready to adjourn. Minutes are in limbo. I talked to Lydia about that as well today. She'll be back Monday. She's going to address that issue.
I'm trying to get a direct answer from Chrissy, and I mean,
We're almost in violation. There was total confusion at the ZBA meeting last week. They didn't understand what we wanted with Lydia's property, and they kicked it back to us to explain. What, I don't know. And Lydia will probably be coming on the 5th to explain whatever needs explaining from the ZBA, so we can communicate back to them about what answers they wanted.
They should be in direct contact with the property owners, not us. We make a recommendation.
They had a meeting. Lydia's husband was there because she was out of town. And I don't know what happened at the meeting. I wasn't there.
I was there. They did not understand the positive recommendation that you guys sent to them. They didn't understand what exactly you guys were recommending to them based on the side yard and rear yard variances
5 feet and 5
for the
feet.
garage. And they also felt that the carport should have been a separate variance within the side yard.
2 variances.
Well, I can
Yeah.
understand that.
I can understand that.
But we issued our recommendation on both of them, which was, we think it was appropriate to put them 5 and 5. And if they have questions, they should deal with the property owners, not us.
And many times Copeland says, that's not our bailiwick. No, they get off, I've been to ZBA meetings, they get off on all kinds of tangents that really are our concern, not their concern, and will be addressed when the applicant, if it's approved, comes back to us, we
Right.
address these issues. And I'm sure Colton, I always hear Colton saying, that's not our bailiwick, but they get off on, well, why are you doing this? Why couldn't the garage be smaller? Why couldn't the, because we can't have it with the pool. And Mark Rominsky says, that, and they're asking questions that are not, we said, we made a positive recommendation because we feel, we understand that it's okay. And they want Mark Rominsky to re-explain to them that there's a certain setback between the pool and the
Was
septic tank
Grominski
and the
there?
garage and the whole thing. That's not.
Was Grominski there?
No.
No.
Oh, well, that's probably the real problem. Is
It
that
was
her
just-
husband, Michael, I guess,
Michael was along without Lydia.
didn't have all the answers they wanted, and Grominski would be the person to provide them, or if Lydia's around, maybe she has a better explanation, but They shouldn't have to come back to us.
Well, not only, but what you're saying, I think is spot on, because if they had to ask that type of question, that he should have answered and answered to us, and we began to represent them, what if we gave the wrong answer?
Yeah.
We were set, when they represented it to us, we thought we understood it, and we made our decision and our recommendation based on that, but they should be able to speak to the people that can represent the applicant.
Yeah.
We're not representing the applicant to them.
So we shouldn't be put in the point of trying to explain something that's
That's
their
right.
business.
And this is only they're saying 505 is okay, then they come back and then we will work on the site plan to see exactly what it looks like. But they get, I understand you want to know why the question that I ask, always the question, why do you have, because this is, my wife is on the ZBA and says, don't send them there. Why didn't you say, obey the law? Why can you not build something 10 feet from the, why do you have to, can it be slid over? Why do you have to come for a variance and break the law? Can't you simply build it? And when we talked that to Lisa about the garage, they moved the garage like 4 feet over, so it wouldn't require a variance. They made it 10 feet from the fence.
They have a much bigger property.
They have a bigger property. So, we always try and always ask that question, to say, can't you figure out a way to do this within the code? And you have to figure, and Mark Rominsky made the explanation about the pool and septic and all the things, and it has to be there. It can't be,
Plus there was good screening there.
and a car is so long, and then you go to pool, septic, garage, car, and now you're 5 feet from the property line. So that made perfect sense to us, but.
Well, they don't have to follow our recommendation.
We have said yes, they've said no, we've said no, they've said yes, that happens.
Yeah. So, and, technically, it's not a violation of the law. It's an exception to the law.
Exception.
Yeah, and the law provides for a ZBA and exceptions.
They're the Supreme Court that can
Right.
make the decisions.
So, and especially for area variances, it's supposed to be a certain test, which is not that difficult to make. It's weighing the benefit to the property owner versus the benefit to the neighbors, and if the neighbors aren't complaining.
I thought about it and said to Lydia, maybe when we have something on our agenda that's going to be a recommendation to the ZBA, a ZBA member should come just for that item.
Oh, yeah, they could.
And they could relate back, because sometimes I've gone to a ZBA meeting and said, may I speak, and say, but I shouldn't have to do that. They should come and hear what we said, our determination, make it clear that, well, it made sense what the planning board decided to do, and this is why they voted to do that. But I'll talk to Lydia. I need a couple of hours with Lydia next week to talk about everything, but we'll figure it out. All right? And we need to make a motion to adjourn for a long meeting.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.